Good morning and welcome to the webinar, Classrooms as We Knew Them Are Gone. Are you ready for the digital first classroom of the future? Brought to you by Edquarter in partnership with Catalyst. My name's Jenna Ash-Brown. I'm the editor of Education Technology. And over the next 45 minutes, we'll be discussing what the student experience means post-COVID-19, what we've learned about digital provision and how to cater to students who prefer learning online while still providing a first-class blended offering for those who desire the full campus experience. Viewers, please note that you can ask us questions throughout the webinar, and later we'll open the floor to a Q&A with our guest panel. Speaking of whom, with me today are some experts from the education sector, including Joey Morrison, Director of Sales and Accounts at Catalyst IT. Good morning, Joey.
Morning, thank you. Morning all.
We also have Chris Bonfield, Director of the Centre for Learning and Teaching at the University of Bath. So thanks for joining us, Chris.
Hi there, hi everyone.
And while he's so far been unable to join us, we may also be joined by Neil Stapleton, who is Digital Learning Platform Manager at Cambridge Judge Business School. But get set to hear our panellists' insights on the challenges of shifting to digital provision, how the pandemic has changed the way we study, and what both students and higher education providers need to thrive in this new world. So panelists, if you guys are ready, we can get started.
Sure.
Perfect, great. So in the last 12 months, we've seen institutions across the entire education spectrum shift online at breakneck pace, not just once, but multiple times as the nation bounced in and out of lockdown. So Joey, when it comes to the university sector, what are some of the biggest challenges institutions experience when it comes to transitioning the learning experience over to the digital space?
There's a huge number, and we're going to talk through a number of those in this session, but I think it's really important, firstly, to just sort of to appreciate that ultimately, without the technology solutions that we're all rapidly putting in place at all of our varying institutions, then pretty much teaching stops entirely. If we only dialed back 15 years to before some of the current internet and current digital services that we utilize nowadays, this would have been a much, much larger and much bigger impacting scenario. We're very fortunate that whilst we're all, locked indoors, in some form, education has been able to continue. But of course, it comes with massive challenges. Catalyst look after many university VLEs. We look after Moodle-based learning management systems for Judge, Bath, and many others in the UK. Now, we're going to talk about a number of tools in this session today that help in this space, but it would be our view that the VLE is kind of the heart and soul of a lot of that, and that you hang nearly all of your other technology estate off of a centralized VLE offering. And from our perspective, the number one thing that has been critical or key throughout that period is a stable service, a stable system. I wouldn't doubt that all of you have had issues with that stability as we really ramped up traffic through the beginning of this COVID crisis. For many of our clients, we've seen 3- or 4-fold increase on daily traffic on those platforms. So first and foremost, one of the biggest challenges was stability and making sure that the platform was capable, able, and scalable to meet this totally overnight shift. Beyond that, and as we'll talk about now, it's really about making the most of the tools that you do have, ensuring they're adding value, ensuring that the human component, that your teams, your staff, your students can get on, use them, apply them, and that they are effective, and that you're continuously iterating on that. There's no right way, there's no wrong way. And as long as you're open to how people are solving these problems, which are 100% solved by technology at the end of the day, obviously with humans driving that technology, then I think we're in for a good future. But it's definitely been a heavy year. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, thank you, Joey. Now, Chris, did you and your colleagues experience any of these challenges firsthand? And if so, what sort of strategies did you use to kind of rise above them?
Yeah, thanks, Jenna. Yeah, I really just endorse what Joey was saying. So for us, I think there's the technology strand to that transition, and there's definitely a people strand to that transition. I think the third one, somewhere in the middle, is sort of some of the university processes and ways of working in the university that sort of had to shift as well to enable this to happen. So for us, completely, the VLE I suppose became the home of, it became the online campus. Other tools are obviously plugged into it and linked out from it, but I think that's one thing that shifted quite dramatically for us, is that pre-COVID there was the physical estate, i.e. the physical campus, and then the digital estate. And the physical estate has always perhaps been prioritized or seen as of more value to than the digital estate. And that definitely shifted overnight, that we realized the digital estate isn't more important than the physical one, but is equally important. And we need to look at that in the round for our students. I think the other thing that we did as well is that really was thrust into the core was COVID in particular meant different groups of people suddenly had to come together to work together to solve problems together collectively. So that meant bringing senior academic stakeholders, senior professional service stakeholders and students together into the same room to have a dialogue with each other. And that's been really empowering, sort of a digital culture shift. I think that's something we definitely want to take forward into the future, and being able to make those decisions quite quickly as well. I kind of joked a few weeks ago with one of my colleagues that if you asked me back in February, do you think universities could have shifted their practice within 28 or 24 hours, 48 hours, I would have had a quiet chuckle to myself. But yeah, we did, and we managed it. And the sector has, it's been bumpy, but the sector has achieved it. And core to that for us has been promoting the VLE more strongly, and also the importance of using the VLE to structure our students' learning and guide their learning through this has been really valuable for us.
Great, thanks so much, Chris. It's awesome to hear some kind of first-hand insights from you, so that's great. I'm just going to bounce back over to Joey for a moment. Joey, given your experience in the subject, can you talk us through the difference between technology-enhanced learning over replicating the more traditional Sage and the Stage classroom model in the online teaching space? And I guess explain to our viewers why that distinction is so crucial.
Yeah, I would say that, and it's not, this is in no error, but the first approach that anybody takes when their classroom or physical estate is taken away from them is just to replicate what they currently do in the VLE. And I would expect that most of you have found that that broadly doesn't really work. But at the end of the day, if you have 24 hours a week to solve this problem, it's a start, and a start is certainly where we need to go. So, many people immediately use the VLE or their technology estate, which includes other things like Zoom and so on, to facilitate how you would deliver learning in Sage on Stage style. What you will have found very early on is that engagement is not facilitated when you try to replicate that model like for like. You will also observe probably very quickly that certain student challenges or teaching challenges arise which are unsolvable without the traditional model of one-to-one sessions and additional support and additional services for those that require them. So it's a start, but ultimately you have to move to a more asynchronous style of teaching and learning, and that is a very big piece of work. If you need to take what you normally stand at the front of a room and deliver with voice and whiteboard and whatever, you can't just record that into a video and expect people to sit for 2.5 hours and watch it without the ability to raise their hands and without the ability to interact and engage. So, most people will be, and our experience is that turning a 1-year sort of classroom-led program into a 1-year online-led program will take around a year. It's a very, very big piece of work, and you have to completely re-architect all of your key assets and tools and and delivery components to an asynchronous, heavily self-led, but backed with support and frequent check-in and frequent teaching staff or academic staff availability to support that learning. Now, most VLEs have a wealth, most tools, learning tools, have a wealth of activity types or solutions that can help asynchronous self-led learning. Many of you on this, if not everybody, will have done some kind of online learning course previously, and you'll all have had very good experiences of that, and you'll all have had probably quite bad experiences of that as well, and you'll know why they were good and why they were bad. Particularly if you spend an hour staring at a video which sends you to sleep and doesn't have stimulating interaction throughout that process. It's no different moving a degree program or similar online. It just takes a very long time. It's a lot of work. So You know, that's one of the key things. I think there is a lot of opportunity in this, though. It's not going to go back to how it was, and that's the kind of nature of this webinar. This is, you know, we can't keep saying the old ways or the new world. This is how it's going to be for a long period. And I would hope that much of the work that is going on to digitize and to move these programs online continues to be useful and valuable as we move forward. There's other positives here. The last one I'd like to get is that actually some individuals, some students probably prefer this model. It's probably a small number, but it may give some of your introverts and some of your quieter students a little bit more opportunity to engage, a little bit more opportunity to be heard. It certainly, rightly or wrongly, will dampen some of the loudest and the most vocal, and somewhat level that playing field again for those who are slightly more quiet in the social sense. So it's a lot of work, but hopefully there's some positives in there as well.
Definitely, sounds that way. Thank you, Joey. I'm going to move back over to Chris now. Chris, can you talk to us a little bit about some of the best tools and initiatives you've used to support online learning?
Yeah, I think, again, to echo sort of Joe's comments, that as probably common to the sector, we found that we had quite a lot of those already in our toolkits, so that was fortunate. They were used to differing degrees. I think the only thing that Bath brought in specifically was another video conferencing tool, Zoom, to sit alongside the one that we already had. So that was the only sort of tool that we did add. I think, again, a lot of our staff were already teaching in a kind of blended type way, but wouldn't necessarily have conceptualized it as such. The VLE, I think, traditionally has always been the challenge, the dumping ground for materials, and it's re-envisioning how that's used in a different way in this context. Again, completely agree with Joey. You know, if you do a traditional online degree, there's a lot of work and preparation in there, and staff simply did not have that in the first outbreak. And that's something we were very conscious of at Bath, was to learn from that initial I suppose emergency reaction, try and move towards something more sustainable and more well thought out and designed. One of the challenges, I think, that we always like to start from the pedagogical approach and then think about what tools and technologies help support that, and new technologies can sometimes design new pedagogies as well. One of the challenges is that a lot of the pedagogical theories around how to teach in this new way are designed on models where the students have signed up for that deliberately and want to do 24-hour online design. And we had to think, well, what does this look like when students have actually wanted to come to a campus experience, and how do we give a flavor of that, but also ensure that the digital experience is equally strong? So we did a lot of work with our staff, supporting them, thinking about, as Joey said, rather than that 2-hour-long video, let's chunk that down. Let's move that down to sort of 5-10 minute chunks. And that in itself is a real challenge for some people to reconceptualize what learning looks like in this space traditional to the traditional classroom. So there's a lot of potential there, and I think, to reinforce Joe's point, we need to constantly iterate and constantly reflect on that as we move forward. And staff are learning, and we're learning from our students as well about what works for them and what perhaps we still need to continue to develop. So in terms of the tools, the VLE certainly stayed at the hub, and I think the key one for us was bringing in things like Zoom and Teams on top of that. I think one of the challenges we're facing is we brought these in, they all seem a little bit in their silos, and as we move forward, how to bring that together so there's a seamless experience for staff and students, I think.
Great, thanks, Chris. And talking of students, do you have any examples? Actually, Joey kind of mentioned it a little bit about introverted students who are given more of a chance to thrive. Do you have any examples you can talk to us about students who definitely prefer the digital space over face-to-face?
Yeah, so one thing at Bath we did is, I think most universities will have a sort of end of semester check-in survey with their students. We decided to bring one in week 4 and week 8 of our term, sort of see how students were reacting. What was very clear, the message from most of our students, is where the learning has been deliberate, considered, scaffolded, structured well, they have really, really enjoyed it. And they specifically say that they love the flexibility that it's brought, that rather than having to hop on a bus at 8:30 in the pouring rain to get to campus, now they can just log on and do it from their bed. They've definitely sort of enjoyed that opportunity. And I think as Joe was saying, that as staff have got used to teaching on Zoom and Teams in a live sense, they have shifted from that kind of stand and talk deliver to a much more engaged way of teaching using breakout rooms, polls, chatbots. And the students have said what they've really loved over the traditional lecture is the ability to ask questions in real time in the chat box. They said they would feel quite uncomfortable raising their hand in a room of 300 people. Feel more confident having that conversation, and also we're getting a lot more peer-led conversation. So peers are answering each other's questions in real time as the lecture happens, and those conversations no doubt probably did happen in the past, but they weren't necessarily visible to the tutor, and it's enabled to make some of that invisible learning visible, and I think that's really powerful for us.
Definitely, I love that, making the invisible learning visible. That sounds great. So Joey, just over to you. You and your team at Catalyst, it includes technical and pedagogical experts who are dedicated to helping educators get the most out of their VLE platform. And your speciality is, of course, Moodle. So how do you determine where improvements are needed, and what exactly does the process of actioning that entail?
That's a really good question. There's a couple of points in this. I mean, we look after quite a large number of universities, growing all the time, and that's global. It's not just here. We've got a global audience here, so that's great. So we get exposure to a lot of problems, and you may kind of appreciate that actually a lot of the problems are common. There's many cases where we open discussions with our partners and our clients, and we talk about an issue they're facing, a challenge that is arising, and in a number of cases, we've actually already got some ideas from some of our other discussions, or potentially we already have a solution. Now that's in the technology space. In the technology space, can it go faster? Can it be smoother? Can it serve clients in China? Can it work on these devices? That's all simple. But we also recognize that for many of our partners, they have a tool that they're not necessarily applying to its full capacity. And for that reason, we have a number of our team who are historically from the higher ed or education sector. In that space, you might call them learning technologists. And their role is normally to help staff and faculty to make the most of the tool. We recognize that we had a duty to do this for our clients and our partners, and so we have a number of those upon our team who, when the question is more of an application or more of a how could I solve this this classroom challenge, this delivery challenge, this pedagogical challenge with your tool or with your tool estate, then we do have a team of consultants available to help in that space as well. Both of them are really important, and beyond that, training. So if your staff need upskilling, which we will talk about in a minute, then it's absolutely important that we and our partners are training their frontline staff in how to make the most of a tool. We talked about a really good example the other day, whereby if you're not technology savvy, you are now very exposed when you jump on a Zoom call in front of 300, very tech savvy students, and maybe can't work the breakout room or don't understand how to gather the questions and answers that have been put in chat and so on. So it's really important to support the staff and those people on the front line as much as it is with the tech.
Thanks, Joey. And Chris, so can you talk to us about some of the digital upskilling that's been happening at the University of Bath?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we took a multi-pronged approach. Initially, back in March last year, it was sort of showing staff some of the key tools, how to schedule a Zoom meeting and sort of things like that. I think we shifted from that into supporting them in this way to saying, first of all, you are a great teacher. You know how to teach. We're not asking you to fundamentally reconceptualize how to teach, but here are some tools that will help you to deliver that online, and giving them the reassurance that they already had that skill set as a teacher. They just needed to use some of these tools in different ways. We ran a program, we identified some key leads for all of our departments, our academic departments, and we designed a sort of 1 week blended online course for them to go through, and we actually led them through that. Our learning technologists actually designed that so they could experience what it's like from the other end as well. And then we asked them to sort of act as the trainer in their departments. As I think one of the most powerful things I think we always find is that our academic staff listen and respect to other academics, and if we can bring them on board and buy them in, and we build trust with them, they then act as ambassadors in their departments to spread that word. So that was very powerful for us. We also worked quite closely with GIST. We literally just implemented one of the GIST digital skills survey tools, I think the Insight survey tool. So we ran that with our staff and students to see where their baseline was at. And I think quite common to the sector, I think staff felt they had a good, reasonable level of confidence, but where they needed extra support was in things like video creation, video editing. And we've done a lot of work with staff to try and first of all go, you don't need to be, a top flight video editor for what you need to do. Here's some basic tools that you can use and use them well. Simply just buy good microphones. It's step one is, on the line to that. So we did a lot of work in that area. I think we also have been doing a lot of sort of workshops with our staff as well as things have emerged. So for instance, breakout rooms, we've had a lot of feedback that where they aren't necessarily used thoughtfully, students are left in a breakout room going, what am I doing here? Why have I been asked? Why have I been moved into this breakout room for 20 minutes to talk to my friends? And making it much more, articulating to them much more clearly why we're asking them to move into those breakout spaces and what activities we want them to do. So we've done a lot of work with staff on that, sort of side by side with them.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris. I can see we have been joined by Neil. Hi, Neil. Nice to see you.
Hello. I'm dreadfully sorry. Something
don't
came
worry.
up, something technical came up, and I'm afraid I couldn't join until now.
No problem. It's nice to have you here. We're actually on to the final question before the audience Q&A. We've got lots of questions coming in, so that's great. I'm going to direct this over to Joey first. So Joey, talking long term, what do you think this rapid shift towards digital means for the student experience post-pandemic?
Like we kind of touched on earlier, it's not going back. And as long as we keep iterating and improving and ensuring that the delivery of the learning and the education continues, then there's a number of other challenges to solve, which include all of the other reasons, like it or not, why people might go to university, which is, as much about leaving with a degree as it is about stepping out into the big wide world and getting exposed to new networks and so on. Now, I think much of that can be facilitated, and many of the sort of students of today will already be quite plugged into sort of the social network side of things and how you network remotely and so on. But I think that once we solve the immediate challenge of ensuring that the degree program is a success and engaging, a good example, one of our team who's on this call, actually, Sam, just this month has completed a complete digitization of a degree program for Bolton Uni, which is now about to be released and will be, as we described earlier, fully online. So a very big piece of work. But as we get to those being in place, I think the next challenges for the kind of university sector as a whole is to ensure that all of the other values, value add that you get from studying can still be facilitated in some form. That's probably going to be the bigger one, but I think it's really key to note that we're not going to go back, only forward from here. And hopefully we can continue to go forward, positively, having learned a lot in a very short space of time, and then able to apply it effectively in iterations.
Thank you, Joey. Neil, let's hear from you. What do you think this rapid shift towards digital means for the student experience post-pandemic?
So, apologies again to everyone for my lateness, but I think the biggest takeaway really is that it's been a bit of a shot in the arm for all of us in higher education. I think the expectations have been raised, and I think our big focus now is on developing more joined up digital systems and a better network of development for our teachers and for those administrating our learning. So, and I think we won't see things go back, but we will see things. I hope that our focus will shift to people focused conversations. Most of the technologies that we require are in place, and it's now about how we really streamline and join up those technologies that we already have. There's, barring things like VR and maybe AR technologies, which will come in time, but barring those kinds of outliers, we have everything that we need in place. And now it's about actually talking to our students, talking to our educators, and ensuring that the tools work and that they have the skills to make the best use of them, and then look at how we configure all of that to provide the best quality of online education.
Fantastic, thank you, Neil. And last but not least, of course, Chris.
Yeah, I fully endorse what Neil's just said, and Joe as well. I think there's some challenges left to solve, as Neil was saying. I think one of the things that we need to continue to reflect on, I think, at our university, is we are aware of the physical space, we're aware of the digital space, but there's this bit in the middle where you bring the technology into the classroom and you might do sort of something more hybrid. That's been a real challenge for us to think about how we do that, and that's something that we can continue to need to work on and actually reflect if we want to do that, and how do we do that properly. I think as well, thinking slightly broader, it's really opened my eyes. I think my eyes were sort of beginning to look out this before COVID, but what is a degree in the 21st century? We've traditionally asked people to come to a campus for 3 to 4 years and study full-time for 3 to 4 years. Do we still need to do that in the future? Might there be more flexible ways of delivering content? And might there be ways to deliver content more internationally and globally with partners, because of the way the technology was already there, but it's really opened people's eyes to perhaps what they can do in that space. And I've already seen sort of cross global degrees being formed, and we're really interested to sort of explore that area more closely. So I think there's that. And also finally, as I said, our teaching staff know how to teach, but what does it mean to be an academic now in this new world? You have a strong research background, you've had a very strong face-to-face teaching background. What does this now look like when you've added the digital into the mix, and what does it mean for an academic identity and what it means to be an academic?
Thank you so much, Chris. We've had loads of audience questions come in, which is great. So panelists, please just jump in whenever you would like to answer. I'm going to start off with one that was sent before the broadcast today, before we address some of your live questions. So here is one from an anonymous viewer, but they have asked, how do the panel see the journey we should be experienced towards highly effective quality assurance of products that bring educational content into the classroom? Students are entitled to expect that they are receiving first-class online content when this is over and above traditional lectures and seminars.
The immediate piece that jumps out to me is that the gathering of feedback at the end of any activity is hopefully much easier in the new world than it would have been when you asked a room full of students who were maybe urgent to leave to give you some timely and timely feedback on the session they've just carried out, the lab they've just carried out, and so on. So iteration and gathering insight in a timely manner are the two key things. I'd hope the insight and the feedback piece is actually easier in the new world, but I appreciate that the iteration is totally new. There's a very big elephant in the room here. Anything lab-based or anything that requires you to kind of, maybe some of your sports sciences and so on, that's pretty hard. And I'm sure that there's lots of ongoing challenges about how to make sure that they're valuable programs today. But I would hope that it is much easier to gain that student feedback that allows you to iterate now.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think two things spring to mind. Validity is clearly going to continue to be incredibly important, and I think so. Assessment is still critical. I think, as Joey alludes to, it's simulations. A simulation of an experience can't replace that experience, and that's true of sports science as it's true of business education. So we will always need, you know, face-to-face and human experiences to be part of the learning. I think so. Assessment, and then backed up by, I think, you know, I don't think on the we've talked much about analytics, but I think they have a role to play, and I would hope that the role for them would be a very human focused, student focused role, very open, and primarily used to allow students to manage their own journey through online material and to gain insights into what's working well for them, and on the back of that there would be some benefits for organizations as well to design more effective learning through that feedback. So, you know, as well as the feedback that comes at the end of a session or end of a piece of learning, the assessment, and hopefully some good quality analytics administered in the right way will all help with that quality.
Thank you so much, Neil. Okay, let's jump over to one that was submitted by Andrew Field, who first of all said great points from all in this webinar. So thanks for that, Andrew. He says, fair enough that classrooms as we knew them are gone. Some might say they already were. So what will successful classrooms be like in February 2022?
That's a very good question, Andrew.
It is. It is. The challenge. I mean, I mean, I think Chris mentioned that the challenge of the hybrid, what we've been calling the hybrid model, are probably the greatest that we've seen. I think the combination it's always been a challenge to combine the technology and the face-to-face. We've all seen lecture theatres with you know, a sea of laptops, with students perhaps focusing, perhaps not focusing, perhaps, you know, interacting with as part of the session. And then what we've seen during the pandemic is a combination of socially distanced face-to-face and other students joining remotely. Again, I think the technologies are there. You know, we have the technologies. You may have seen these wow rooms, and I forget what the feature in Teams is that sits everybody like they're in a lecture theatre.
Yes.
I forget what it's called, but yeah, I mean, I think the technology has a place has a part to play. But I think what we hope is a very active space, a very active, focused on working with students to achieve their learning aims in a really, really active way, and hopefully more access to educators more directly. So rather than, you know, taking part in a lecture and then perhaps having a few moments with that subject matter expert, having richer online tools that allow you to draw more from the subject experts.
I fully endorse that, Neil. I'd say that for us as well, I think we're looking at what do we use online tools for. So we can do 300-400 people in a Zoom class easily enough, but that's quite a challenge to do that in our physical spaces on campus. So when we do come back to campus, what are we using those spaces for in the future? What kind of teaching do we want to happen? What's really valuable about bringing people together physically, and how do we enable teaching scenarios to develop that? And also just practically as well, there's if you take the February 22 one, I mean, that might feel a fair way off, but actually to transform teaching spaces on a physical campus requires capital investment, sometimes significant capital investment.
Oh, Chris is frozen on my screen.
I've lost Chris too. Oh no.
That's Chris too. Okay. Oh, that's a shame. I'm sure he'll be back. Let's just before we move on, Neil, I was going to ask, are you okay? We've got so many questions. Will you be okay to hang on?
I'm fine.
Perfect.
The least
okay.
I can do considering my my late arrival.
Oh, thank you. So honestly, it's really kicking off in the Q&A. I'm sure you guys can see. And we also had, as I mentioned, quite a few before we broadcast today. So here's another one that Hey, Chris, are you back? He'll be back, I'm sure.
Momentarily.
So here was another one that was sent through prior to the broadcast. How is the pedagogy evolving to take advantage of a digital first classroom, and how are we helping support staff to adapt?
So I think, how are we supporting staff? I think the biggest thing that's happened has been the creation of networks, and I think that's happened not on its own. I think organizations have created spaces for educators to discuss, and what I've seen is a really, really active conversation happening around practice, what works, what doesn't work, where the design of design of assessment, of every aspect of the delivery of learning has been under scrutiny and been discussed, and I hope that continues. I think there is not a, we're currently wrangling with the idea of a training program to create better digital educators, but I think in reality that can only go so far. We can train our faculty to use the digital tools, but in terms of the design and how they're applied in the teaching, then that has to be a discussion between educators, between people who are having the experience and understanding what works and what doesn't work, and then also obviously linking in the feedback and everything we talked about a moment ago, the analytics, and trying to understand better how impactful those changes are on learners and outcomes for learners.
Great, thank you, Neil. We got Chris back, so that's great. We lost you for a minute there, Chris. Such is the nature of these internet webinars. Let's do a live question now from an anonymous attendee who asked, how would you best engage with academics to actually assist them with training and closing the skills gap? I guess we kind of touched on that a little bit there, Neil, but there are some who, for whatever reason, are disinterested with future technologies and who are looking to return to whiteboards as soon as possible.
I think, what we're doing right now, actually, and using conferencing technology, screen sharing, has had a positive impact, I think, on our ability to support our educators. I think it's perhaps overplayed that's a really significant number who want to just go back to exactly how things were, and I think I hear a lot of voices saying that we want to take what we've learned through this and apply it alongside what we know works well face to face, and they want to take the best from both worlds, from the digital realm and from face to face, and combine those things. And we're having daily really good, healthy conversations about how to do that. So I would hope that those who step forward and want to do that will be the people we work with. The success will be seen, things will progress, and others will join on that journey later on.
Fantastic, thank you, Neil. Here is one that was sent prior to the broadcast today. What do the panel think can be done to best support school leavers into further and higher education when they have not adapted to or been able to work with remote or blended learning?
We've done some work in that area as part of our widening participation offer. So actually, we use a MOOC platform as well as the sort of VLE platform, and what we did with partners of some schools to design some transitions type of courses to enable students to sort of think and envisage what online learning looks like. And I think that was one challenge we definitely heard from our teachers this year from schools, was like, well, what's this going to look like when the student actually gets into the university? So we've been trying to do a lot of work in that area to give students a flavour of what online learning looks like. I think one of the key messages that we've tried to emphasize, that good online learning, like almost anything in life, requires you to take an active participation in it. And we don't want passive recipients of people sat in a room, not thinking about the questions, not engaging. So how do we constantly reinforce the students and give them the confidence, but also the skills to be active participants in their learning? And I think that's one of the real powerful things we want to continue with.
In this space as well, I would imagine that correctly applied, it's actually quite a lot easier to give potential, future students access, flavor, introductions to your institution, to the programs you provide, to how learning shapes up. I mean, many, coming back to a technology solution a little bit, many of these tools nowadays can integrate quite seamlessly. And there is, I think of your kind of visit days or open days where you would head off to where you might go to uni and you'd get a flavor of how campus life was. Well, you can actually do that now without leaving your current home, albeit you're not walking around some beautiful buildings and a beautiful town and your future accommodation, but you are seeing how the subject matter shapes up, who your peers might be, what your kind of outcomes might look like, and so on. So, it's not all bad. There are some potential positives and improvements in there as well.
Thanks, Joey. Here is one from one of our live viewers, Jacob. We are now in a very fluid situation as we struggle to adjust to the new normal. And for the first time as educational institutions, we are trying to keep education going through digital means, but it's still at a very basic level. What do you suggest we should do to prepare to make the shift to a blended system of online and offline modes, or to a completely digital mode?
Well, for me, it would be some showcases first and foremost. Find some exceptional examples and celebrate them. There was another question earlier around, how to get everybody engaged with moving to this model, and some staff members who might not want to. And it's a complete tangent, but there's a lot of research in change adoption. And something I personally am a huge fan of in change adoption is celebrating early adopters and celebrating those who are doing it right. And so in the same way here, there must be, those who are better prepared, slightly ahead of the pack, if you like, and who are turning out very, very good examples. And I would suggest that celebrating those is a very good way to bring the majority with you.
Great.
I totally agree for that.
I do agree. Sorry, go on, Chris.
I was just going to say, for us, I think also there's a wider narrative outside perhaps the sector sometimes that digital equals deficit, that the digital teaching is less than or not equal to physical teaching. And actually, I think one thing this year can show is that when done well, it can hold its own. And it has real value. And I think that's something we adopted a very cheesy motto internally, that blend is best going forward. I'm not sure how long that's going to last, but to try and get over this idea that we're giving students something second rate, and we're not. We're giving them a high quality experience, and there's things that we want to take forward with that.
And just to add to that, I think we shouldn't forget as well that showcasing is fantastic, and I totally agree with showcasing the very best, and using it as something to learn lessons from and look forward to. But if we look at education as a whole, from primary through secondary, further education and higher, all of those organizations, however big or small, have had to adapt. And something that's come back to me time and time again has been resilience. It's something that's taught to primary school students. Something my daughter has come home with, sort of stories of the lessons that have focused on that. And we've all had to be resilient. And I think something that's important is to actually also showcase the struggles and showcase the things that we found hard, and to not set a bar too high, that those who maybe are maybe slightly behind some of our organizations that we'd want to showcase in terms of their technology adoption, have still adapted and been resilient and found ways quite creative ways sometimes to continue what they're doing. So yeah, a slightly warts and all approach would be good as well, and open up a conversation about what we've all found difficult in this, which is quite often quite a human story, I think.
Great, some awesome advice there. Thanks, guys. And we are just going to carry on for a few minutes longer. Thank you, panels, for sticking with us, because we've still got lots of great questions to get through. So so here's one that was sent beforehand as well from Nigel at Cardiff Met University. He says, there has always been discussion about the digital elite and those with and without access to technology or the ability to use the technology. Do the panel feel we will be / have been creating a greater division in society in terms of access to digital technology? And if so, how can educational institutions support the students and staff to combat this?
Yeah, absolutely. It would be fair to say that everybody has leaped to a solution with, you know, some assumption. There's another question actually in the live chat here which touches on this about poor internet connections. We are actually broadly across most of the UK, where all of us guys are sat at the moment, very fortunate. We have very, very strong internet networks. They're pretty resilient. They are pretty fast. You can, you know, in many cases have the kids watching Netflix at the same time as you are running on a Zoom call. That is a luxury that most of the world can't lean upon, or even some far-flung corners of our isles themselves. So yes, I think that, you know, there are ways to deal with this. I know there's a number of great initiatives to ensure that the technology that's required for all people to learn is provided. Hopefully that continues, and that you know, the government and grant support exists to make sure that at least devices are available. Networks, I would argue you can kind of solve this now with your 3Gs, 4Gs, with some other solutions. There's even, you know, rightly or wrongly, the evolution of Skynet, as it's being called, to ensure that internet can be delivered to everyone everywhere. There is the other side of the coin. You could ensure that you're not trying to serve 4K video to everybody as a critical learning piece. You could ensure that you're not expecting everybody to, you know, to require very large internet pipes in order to deliver. Beyond this, and if I, you know, this is actually outside of the education space, but Catalyst work with a number of very, very famous charities, UNICEF, Save the Children, HLA, and we actually deliver devices that enable you to take the entire learning module offline, download that platform to your laptop or to your phone, and take that device completely away from the internet, carry out your learning. When a synchronization opportunity arises later, your results and your data and your input is shared back. And that is currently active across most of the African continent for those three organizations. So there's probably things to learn from outside of the sector that we're all sat in as well, but it's a very real problem. And yes, absolutely, digital natives have probably leaped quite fast, and some people will be feeling left behind, and we need to look after them and bring them along.
Fantastic, thank you, Joey. Let's answer another live question. This one's from Andrew Field. Might we stop talking about a new normal and instead talk about enhanced, better, more equitably, more effectively? There is such potential for us to deliver significantly better learning items that help address the climate crisis, support equal access for all, and deliver huge value.
I think if I can come in there, I think one of the things that I've been sort of dying to mention as we've been talking for the last few minutes has been accessibility and inclusion, and I think it's been one of those serendipitous things that we've had a new focus on accessibility over the last couple of years, which had almost come to its height right at the point when the pandemic started. And we, with that renewed focus on our content, and with what Joey's mentioned about making sure that we're not trying to deliver 4K video, you know, we need to focus on making sure that our digital content is as accessible and inclusive as possible, and that goes across, you know, everything we've talked about from you know, raising participation, to reaching out to those who may not have the digital access that we all enjoy. So yeah, I think we need to refocus on the content that we develop and the activities that we make available and the technologies that we use to ensure that they work on low bandwidth and that they are clear and simple and can be used offline and meet the AAA accessibility guidelines and all of those things. And if we do that, then the barriers to access should be very, very small.
Thank you, Neil. Here is another one we got sent prior to broadcasting. I would be interested in ideas and comments around the need for a map of soft competencies for the digital learner, whether we should adapt oh my gosh, can't say that word today, competencies to fit digital environments. So things like computational thinking, virtual leadership, digital collaboration, and how hopefully the the digital classroom will make it easier to measure and assess these competencies. Great question. Bad delivery.
I'd say that yeah, 100%. I think having worked on a number of projects both internally and externally around wider projects around digital transformation, it always comes down to you're transforming people, not necessarily technologies, and the skills that's required to work in the 21st century workplace, classroom. Those softer competencies are so important. I think something we've been very keen to do is starting to intentionally map them in our curriculum through like learning outcomes, either program or unit level, thinking about what are the skills that we want our students to develop, and are we making sure we're actually giving them opportunity to develop them within our curriculum. So for instance, collaboration, rather than necessarily a single authored piece of work, why don't we get them to cross collaborate? And you know, group work is another word for that, I suppose. But you know, how do we actually reinforce those skills that we would like our students to have in our curriculum, and then equipping staff as well sometimes with the skills to enable to deliver that themselves as well.
Amazing. Thank you, Chris. Here is another one of our live questions. As digital classrooms gain the potential to be truly global, delivering a full learning experience, how may this influence university fees? Are we going to see digital only pricing versus blended pricing, evening out of overseas versus home students?
I think the yeah, we've talked a little bit about the need for investment in order to transform, you know, and looking at another question in the chat saying, you know, talking about lecture theatres being, is the traditional lecture theatre dead? Well, we as in lots of organisations have invested in our bricks and mortar lecture theatres, and yes, we may need to reimagine them a little and integrate better technology. That will take investment. Will we see digital only pricing? I think, haven't we already seen that within the marketplace? We're already seeing alternative solutions to the education question being presented to us at a whole range of costs. And I think there will always be room for alternative products, education products within the marketplace. How you judge their quality is based on the individual's needs and what you're looking to get out of that particular education. So yes, we will see, and I think we all have already seen digital only pricing coming into the education market.
Thank you. Let's just try and answer these. I think there's two last final live questions that we should try and squeeze in, if that's okay, guys. First, but from Mike Fish, who asked, I am hearing about networks, Zoom and screen sharing, but what about more fundamental technologies like AI and personalization? What value could these provide, and what changes are needed for their adoption?
I like this question because I don't know if anybody else on this panel has, but I have actually experienced an AI lecture theatre. and it's quite incredible, actually. Albeit you're sat in a normal chair and you place your kit on your head, and now you're sat in amongst 1,000 other people who are in various places around the world looking at, Sage on Stage delivery model again, or something similar. Maybe it could help with labs. Maybe it could help with some of those things that are a little bit harder to do remotely. It has a massive issue again with accessibility. It's exceptionally expensive. It's exceptionally demanding on your infrastructure and networks. If you want to see digital only pricing, then I can tell you that hiring a 3D studio and a range of animators to build out your lecture for 1 hour in that sense is going to increase the costs significantly at the moment. So yes, these are all great technologies. They're a bit early, and I also don't know that they're quite yet there in how to apply them to the learning. But absolutely, in a sort of lab sense, in the same session, I flew to the moon, I think, in one of the Apollo landers, and that itself was, a great learning exercise if it was flavored with learning material around the outside of it, which helped engagement. So they're great, but I would suggest they're a little bit far off yet.
I think they I would agree in most cases. We've done a little bit of work around 360 video, and the focus hasn't been, it's been on the edges of the education experience, I would say. So one of the things we've done is create a sort of kind of a 360 virtual Cambridge experience of punting through Cambridge to try and add some richness to the experience of our students who haven't yet had a chance to actually visit the city. But and then also we've used it slightly more with those students would normally go on a visit to a production line within a factory environment, for example, and there are certainly some fairly immersive experiences that can be created to closely simulate. If you've got a student who hasn't experienced, being in a factory, you can create a fairly reasonably costed immersive experience for some of those things, to give them that experience, and then for them to bring that back into the classroom and have really active discussions about what they've seen. So yes, it's still a way off, but it feels more in reach than it's ever been.
Fantastic, thank you, Neil. And final question we've got time for today. It'd be a shame to miss it, so let's squeeze this one in. There's often a feeling within the academic community that blended learning or distance learning is something to be tolerated, not celebrated. How can we change this viewpoint, and how can we make this method of teaching more accessible to students?
I think one way is to approach it head on and to have those active conversations with our colleagues that feel that way, and to try and really get beneath the genuine reasons for it, and to be having conversations with educators and with students to try and work out where the gaps are. What is it that we're really missing in the blended approach that we need to address in order to make it as rich as a more traditional approach. And we might be surprised, I think, in some of the things that we need to address that we might not currently be addressing or even be focusing on.
I'd say agree. I'd say that I think we've faced two particular challenges in the last year that we aren't quite through yet. One is that if we asked staff to design a blended course, we wouldn't have given them 24 hours notice. We would have given them a lot more lead-in time. So one of the things is, staff haven't necessarily had the chance to reflect yet, or sit back, or even have that space, even a week off to go, oh, let me think about this, because they've been in the thick of it almost constantly since last March. I think secondly as well is that the blended experience we've had this year is not necessarily the same as we might want in the future. So we've had a very heavy online component to the blend this year. As we start people can return back into physical spaces. We want to retain the blend, but what that blend looks like may be different. And the thing that people seem to be saying to me that they're missing is that social component. And now if we can bring that back into the blend, then that might start sort of opening up the conversations. And what we're trying to avoid, I think, is I felt that staff are like an elastic band, and they can stretch and stretch and stretch. And what we don't want to happen is that we let go of that elastic band and goes doing, and it goes straight back to where it was. We want to retain the good bits. I think staff want to do that, but they just haven't had the space or time yet to really reflect on that and think about what that looks like in the longer term.
Thank you, Chris. That's sadly all we've got time for today, guys. There were some amazing questions from the audience. So thank you, audience, for all your great questions and engagement. All of us here at Edquarter would like to thank our panel. So Joey Morrison of Catalyst IT, Neil Stapleton of Cambridge Judge Business School, and Chris Bonfield of the Centre for Learning and Teaching. Thank you, guys. And of course, thanks to you, our audience. To find out more about Catalyst, please visit catalyst-it.co.uk. And you can also stay up to date with the latest education news and keep tabs on our exciting webinar schedule via the Edquarter platform. So that's edtechnology.co.uk, universitybusiness.co.uk, and ie-today.co.uk. We hope to see you again soon, but have a great day, everyone. Stay safe. Thank you again, panelists. That was great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.